All right, here we go, everyone. Another awesome episode of the All Around Adventure podcast. And today on the podcast, I have Stephen Humphreys, who is the founder and CEO of American Veterans Archaeological Recovery, also known as AVAR. Stephen, what's going on, brother? Thanks so much for taking time for joining me today, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for working with us this year. It's an honor to be asked to come back again and bullshit a little bit, frankly.
Yeah, well, it's I definitely been looking forward to having you on because, you know, you got some big things that you're working on right now with AVAR, and we got some amazing things happening this year to get more veterans out into the field to experience field archaeology and help them however we can. But before we kind of get into all of that, though, you know, I want to go back in time a little bit here and hear a little bit more about your story, because every great story has a beginning. So that's kind of where we'll start with you as well, to learn a little bit more about you. And you have spent time in the military, hence why you're doing this veterans nonprofit. So what took you down that path? What ultimately led you to pursue the military?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, basically, I was really interested in all things military. I was interested in military history. I wanted to serve. I did a year at Texas A&M, actually, in Marine Corps ROTC. Decided that
Nice.
The Marine Corps was not quite my thing. So I had some buddies who were doing Air Force ROTC up at University of North Texas. So I actually transferred up there, and I was like, "Hey, I still want to be in the military." And they were like, "Well, this is fun. Why don't you try this out?" And just sort of fell into it. Really enjoyed it, and went through that program and got a BA in history at the same time. So commissioned out as an aircraft maintenance officer, went and did a couple years in Japan working on C-130E models, and then a couple years in Georgia working on E-8C J-STARS surveillance aircraft. And then decided I'd do something different. So I went to Texas A&M again as an instructor this time, taught ROTC, worked with the Corps Cadets for 2 years, really enjoyed that. And really enjoy the teaching component because ROTC instructors get to teach. You know, you're not really a professor. You're kind of an honorary professor-ish person. But I got to teach history of U.S. air power for a couple of years, and that was just a blast. I loved kind of building my own course material, digging into the topic, getting to present it. I thought that was really fun, getting as much interaction as I could with my students. That was really cool. And I'd always enjoyed training and kind of the teaching and training components and just loved it. So ROTC tours are limited. You can only do a couple of years of that. But I thought, you know what, I really want to teach. And I just met my wife at that time, and it just so happened that like all these things kind of came together. And I thought, you know what, I'm gonna get out. I'm gonna get a PhD. I'm gonna go to seminary and get a PhD that's gonna, you know, kind of allow me to come back in as a chaplain and keep helping troops. Turns out seminary had a dig in Israel. I had never thought about archaeology before. I think archaeology books in general, and you might agree with this, like archaeology texts tend to be really boring.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you just pick one up in the library, I remember as a kid, you know, thinking, oh, Indiana Jones is cool. I'm going to see what this is all about. And going and picking up a book on lithics of all things. So like sharpened stones. And just flipping through that and being like, wow, well, that killed that buzz. There is nothing related to this that I ever want to learn about. So I completely put it out of my mind until I was in seminary. And I just thought, well, you know, going to Israel would be cool. Getting to participate in history would be cool. I'll give this a shot. And I got out there and just absolutely loved it. And I've never looked back since. Changed all my degrees and everything to archaeology. Ended up doing an MA in archaeology and an MA in theology at seminary. And then came over to England to do a PhD in archaeology at Durham University because they really focused on my academic area of expertise is sort of early Christian archaeology and the archaeology of charity. That's what I really academically look at. They had a good program in it. Found a good supervisor over here and started going through the PhD program. As a part of that program, I bumped into some British folks that were doing veteran archaeology programs. And kind of got exposed to how that was working and thought, you know what, this needs to be a thing in the U.S. So you mentioned kind of the origins of the program, you know, which is funny because you were in on the origins of that program. You were actually on our first dig just by accident, you know. We didn't know each other at the time. You just happened to be working on the same site. And
yeah, right place, right time.
Yeah, Steve Roskams, who happened to be from the University of York, who was running that project, was like, oh yeah, you're working with veterans? I got an American veteran out here working with us. So yeah, that was square one for us, and we've really grown quite a bit since then, and I think gotten better at figuring out how to use archaeology to help veterans, how to use archaeology in more of a long-term context to help veterans. So yeah, we're kind of growing by leaps and bounds right now since 2016 when we kicked off.
All right, outstanding. I was just thinking, you mentioned how reading up on archaeology and doing all these things, that it was a little bit boring at first, just trying to get your stride with that. And that's certainly one thing I've noticed throughout my own studies is that, there's a lot of archaeologists out there that are brilliant, absolutely knowledgeable, but when they try to extend archaeology to let's say the lay audience, they may fall short a little bit. They don't make it quite as exciting or as engaging. Yeah. And so I think it's a little bit tricky at times to find someone who, obviously has both the knowledge and has the good means to present it in a way that is very captivating. And because, yeah, you're right. A lot of people have it in their minds just, watching Indiana Jones or Lara Croft or playing the Uncharted video games, and they have this romanticized version of it, right? But it does take a little bit to get your stride. But once you're actually out in the field and you're actually doing all this stuff, making these discoveries yourself, I say that for me was a total game changer. Would you say that'd be accurate for you as well?
Oh yeah, and I think it's a little frustrating for me because reading through a lot of the publications on public archaeology and community archaeology and these types of things, you hear over and over that archaeology has inherent value. And I've really come to hate that phrase because I think archaeology has to start being able to show actual value. Like it has to be able to do something, whether that's answer big questions that non-archaeologists have. Or in my case, helping veterans with mental health and with kind of their long-term goals. We have to be able to make archaeology actually serve a purpose if we're going to continue to be able to do it. People are kind of operating on shoestring budgets right now, and if you can't tell them hey, this is why we're spending $100,000 on a project, and that's archaeologists in general, because AVAR does not spend $100,000 on projects. But if a university is going to go out and spend that kind of money on an archaeology project or whatnot, I would want to know too, when there may be a better use for that $100K when you got people starving and hurting all around you and whatnot.
Right.
Is it really that important to learn about land use in Bronze Age Mesopotamia or whatever? Sometimes there's a better use of that money. So I think archaeology has to do a better job of communicating why it's important to learn this and communicating what it can actually serve.
Absolutely. So having this background in the military, being an officer in the Air Force and ultimately being an instructor and a mentor to many along the way, would you feel that this served you pretty well once you actually decided to make that transition to archaeology? And because, especially academic studies around archaeology and also in the PhD level where you're at right now, it's very intense, very intensive, very drawn out, very long. So would you say your military experience, really served you well as you were making this transition to academia?
Yeah, well, I think academics have a really different focal point than military officers, NCOs do. In the military, you're always taught to balance the mission and the people against one another.
Right.
And to really use each of those two things to complement the other. The mission helps you build your people, and the people are the ones that accomplish the mission. And I was really shocked when I got into academia that leadership mentality does not exist. Everything in academia is really mission oriented. But there's no focus or very minimal focus on actually developing your people or on using that mission in order to develop your people. That just doesn't really exist. So I think that what that military experience gave me was another perspective when I came in that was really people oriented compared to most academics. And yeah, AVAR we do good quality archaeology. And it's because I believe that it's that mission orientation. It's the training that lets you do the mission well, that builds the team, that improves the mental health. But I think those two things have to be there together. When you just focus on the mission, when you just throw bodies at the mission, what you do is you break bodies, and in the end, you shortchange yourself in terms of being able to complete future missions because you don't have those capabilities anymore. People bleed out of the field, and that's exactly what's happening in archaeology. If you don't take care of your trained labor, that trained labor is going to take care of themselves. They're going to leave and they're going to find something else they can do.
Right.
So what we're doing is working in a system and trying to enhance a system that has not done a great job of taking care of its people so far.
Absolutely. And that's actually, there's a lot of correlation to that because like being in the Marine Corps myself, those were like the two main just fundamental principles of leadership that I was taught. It was accomplishing the mission and looking out for the welfare of your troops. And you and I, we talked a little bit about this in the past, that if you take care of your people, people will take care of the mission. And even if you look throughout history, you and I being archaeologists, I want to bring up a little bit of history here as well. One of the reasons why the Romans were so successful in all the conquests that they've done is because the leadership there always made sure that their troops were well fed. They had all their resources taken care of. And that's what made them so strong and so formidable, is because, they made it a point to look out for their soldiers and their troops that way. And it's very much the same thing. Well, not just within archaeology, but maybe if we have even any leaders listening in, just the regular realms, corporate, wherever it might be, is that these same leadership principles still apply. It's just like, I know some leaders try to command respect from, their subordinates, but it's like they don't try to earn it by looking out for them first, looking out for their best interests. And like, that's how you really, get the mission accomplished is, absolutely, just looking out for the welfare of your people.
Yeah. And all that too. I mean, I was a company grader when I was in the military, so I didn't do a lot of what you might call diplomacy, I guess, kind of at the staff level. But what I've really seen is that if AVAR does take care of its people, I've been blown away by how much my participants have taken care of me. I mean, I have participants kind of reaching out and saying, "Hey, I know you're really busy. I know you're really stressed. Like, how can I help with the program? What do you need me to do?" And that's been really reassuring. That's reminded me what that military atmosphere was like, because in academia, you don't have that. I mean, you can work your tail off in academia and no one's ever going to come to you and be like, "Hey, do you need a hand?" That just doesn't really happen. And also the partners that we've worked with, the partners are the ones that are really making this work. I was just saying a couple of days ago that a lot of times I really feel like a placeholder because, like, I'm running this program, but then you've got like guys from the National Park Service, you've got folks from the Battlefield Trust, you've got folks from the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency. Now we've got folks from the VA that are coming along and saying, "Okay, this is a cool idea. Like, how do we help you make this work? How do we give you more resources so that you can actually make this a viable long-term thing to keep helping these guys?" So, when you're taking care of your people, I think, and accomplishing your mission, other people and your people are going to see that you're doing that, and they're going to come in and say, "Okay, this is something that's got wheels to it." So yeah, I've been blown away by just how much being that kind of person that takes care of my guys has pushed the program forward.
All right, outstanding. So hearing a little bit just about your own pursuit in archaeology, kind of like leading up to the development of AVAR, where has this taken you? Tell us a little bit about some of the fieldwork experience that you've done. I know you've gotten to travel and work in some pretty amazing places around the world. So just, where has this led you so far?
Yeah, so my own academic stuff is all Israel, Cyprus, tiny bit of Jordan, but really Israel and Cyprus are the kinds of archaeology that I personally am really comfortable with, and I love it. I mean, you'll know when you go on your first site, people just connect to certain sites, I guess. And for me, the sites that I connected to quickly were in southern Cyprus. Just loved it. Looked forward to going back every year. And in my case, it was really because you get to go to another country and you get to be a local for 4 or 6 weeks. You really get invited into that culture, which is a really cool thing. You're not there as a tourist. You're not there just digging holes in someone else's ground. You're kind of there experiencing that culture's history with them and trying to participate with them. And that is completely unique, I think. So yeah, I dug a couple sites in Israel. Tel Gezer was my first. I did a couple seasons out there and also some survey work out there. Corian in southern Cyprus is kind of that sweetheart site for me, I guess, that I just always have really fond memories of. The team out there was great. We always stayed really close afterwards. Still stay in contact with all those guys. Get to bump into them at annual conferences and stuff, which is really cool.
Nice.
I've done a couple other projects in Israel. With AVAR, I've worked Beit Sherim, which is a 2nd century Roman site. It's a Jewish Roman village, actually, up in northern Israel, not too far from Haifa. And the team up there was great. The site was incredible. That was a really cool experience. The last couple of years, we've been working with the Beit Lehi Regional Project, which is down near Gaza, actually. And that's been an awesome experience. I mean, the dig team is great. Once again, like I just love working with Israelis. They have a straightforward mentality that I think mixes really well with American veterans. And that tell it like it is kind of focus, I think, is great. I appreciate working with people who have that.
Right.
But the site's been awesome. We camp out there. We're next to some kind of underground Jewish bunker, essentially, sites that were utilized during the Jewish revolts. So that's been really cool for the guys to kind of go in and explore a little bit in their downtime. But camping in Israel is something I never thought that I would get to do. Hearing jackals cry at night in Israel is a really unique experience. And then getting up the next day and getting to dig a 2,300-year-old temple, that's a cool thing to do. But I've also got to dig in England a couple times. We met digging the Roman fort at Alton, for example, up in Yorkshire.
Right.
That was a really cool site. Never thought I'd dig a Roman fort in England. I've now done the DPA. Oh, I've gotten to dig a couple other sites as well. I've got to dig a Bronze Age site out here and a couple other more recent ones. DPA stuff now that we're doing, the American Service Member Recovery, is a really cool mission, and it's a really different way of digging. But for me, as someone who kind of focuses on more 1,500-year-old stuff, it's really cool to be able to read about the people that I'm trying to recover and see what they were going through and kind of experience really exactly what they had on board with them at the end, but also, of course, to get to make that emotional connection back to family members in the United States. It's a really cool mission. It's a really different way of digging, but it's a really cool way of digging.
All right.
So yeah, I've got to bounce around. And I should mention too, I almost left it out, the battlefield at Saratoga that we got to dig in 2019, that we got to dig in 2019 with the National Park Service. I, to be really honest, was not all that interested in American archaeology prior to coming out to that site. I mean, I was one of these guys that kind of grew up thinking archaeology was something that happened overseas.
Right.
But Saratoga is just such an incredible site. It had never been worked on archaeologically before. The second battlefield had never been worked on archaeologically before the first had. But the second battlefield is the one where the Americans won. And because it hadn't been touched archaeologically, we really had no idea what we would find out there. But the Park Service, Bill Griswold, Amy Bracewell, the Battlefield Trust, all the folks that we worked with out there, it was so cool to get to go out there to a site that hadn't been touched and really discover things for the first time. Advanced Metal Detecting for the Archaeologist really opened my eyes. It's an organization that does metal detection training. Really opened my eyes to the potential of metal detecting and how someone who's really good at metal detecting can use that as an interpretive tool on an archaeological site. Because as you know, you and probably a lot of your listeners will know, metal detectors kind of get a bad rap in archaeology. But these guys are good at it. And I'm convinced now, this is the only way to properly understand a battlefield site like this. Just because there's such a kind of wide dispersal of material that you're looking for, digging holes in the ground is just going to take a lot of time and a lot of energy. So that's been a really, really cool site. I've been reading books about the Revolutionary War ever since then because I've kind of got into it. Super excited that we get to go back out there and do some more work on that project this year. So yeah, I've got to bounce around a little bit. I was just telling someone last week that one of the cool things for me about the AVAR project is I get to dig so many more sites than most archaeologists do. I get to bounce from country to country. I get to see so many different kinds of archaeology done by so many different people and really see how their different methods work. And again, because I really enjoy education and training, I get to then take all those different kind of lessons and look at how do we use the best of this stuff to make top tier archaeologists out of these vets that we have coming in? How do we build a training program out of all this stuff? It's really going to help these guys, because most archaeologists will only be exposed to maybe one or two systems during their lifetime because we work in such small areas. Well, I get to work internationally all the time. So with a bunch of different archaeologists. So getting the opportunity to take all that knowledge and figure out how to condense that down into something that makes these guys the best of the best. That's fun for me.
All right, right on. Well, I want to focus in on Israel for a second here because, I've been to Israel myself and it is just a fantastic country. And I was there for like 2 weeks. And even though this is not a very big country, 2 weeks was not nearly enough time to see everything. There is just so much in that one small country. But I often get asked when I tell other people that I've visited Israel before, and I'm sure you've probably been asked this as well. So I kind of just want to bring it up really quick because, a lot of people that I've mentioned this to, they're interested of going to Israel because, they think of the history and the archaeology and things like that, but they're worried about their safety. So I wanted to ask you, what was kind of your observations and as far as like safety, or if you had any safety concerns while you were there? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think like any big city, you need to, like, if you're going to go to Jerusalem, you need to be aware of what's going on at the time. But I tell people too, I feel safer in Israel than just about any other place in the world. That's partially because, I mean, the IDF, you see armed soldiers who are trained with their weapons walking around all the time. It's mandatory for them during one part of their service to carry their weapons on them. So, that if something does happen, it's going to get shut down fairly fast. But also there's just really not a lot of, like violent crime and whatnot in Israel, like crime in general, like, especially where we work kind of in the boonies, which is kind of what I mentioned earlier. You get to work in really interesting areas. So when I go to Israel, I'm not in tourist hotspots. I'm not working in downtown Tel Aviv. I'm not working in downtown Jerusalem. We tour through Jerusalem because I love it, and our participants tend to want to, and I want to show them that. But the place we're working, again, we're camping out in the middle of nowhere. No one's going to come out there and mess with us. We're so far out that, why would we don't see anybody else. So, yeah, I've never had any concerns whatsoever with safety in Israel. I think they take things seriously over there in a way that makes me feel comfortable.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way too. I mean, it was a little bit interesting, and you'd notice that, it might feel a little bit tense, like, at first, especially, when I saw everyone there. I got these, young, late teen, early 20-year-olds who are, like out and about, even in civilian clothes. They still got their rifles to them. I see like two guys on a train heading to a beach destination. They're wearing, swim trunks and flip flops and tank tops, and they still got their rifles. And you'll see like these young women that are out in the bars on a Friday night wearing, their dresses, and they got their rifles slung to their back while they're walking up to the bar. And I'm like, all right, this is interesting, to say the least. But it was the same feeling like you described. If something went down, I'm fine, because all of these armed civilians, they're just going to, rise to the occasion and take care of it right away.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't mention earlier, but I dug a site called Apollonia Arsuf, which is on the coast. We were digging kind of the Islamic conquest kind of period on the site, 7th century. And that's the first time I've ever seen someone bring a saw out to the field. I was just like, wow, okay, I guess we're good. But that was also gunships fly up and down the coast of Israel constantly. I mean, you constantly see a military presence, to the point that one of the questions that we have from people who don't go over there, who are just kind of looking at this from the outside, is all this military noise, is hearing F-16s and F-15s take off all the time, is that going to get to the vets that you're taking out there? So you're around a friendly military presence pretty much all the time when you're there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then, so that was just one of the amazing experiences that you had in archaeology. And you also mentioned archaeology a little bit here in the U.S. with investigating the Battle of Saratoga. And that's certainly something that I've come to find out as well, because I've been working as an archaeologist here in the U.S. for about a couple years now. And it's just, I was in the same mindset for a long time too. I just thought that archaeology was something that was, something that was done in England and Europe and in other places around the world. I never really quite tied it to here in the U.S., but come to find out, there is a lot of amazing archaeology here too. I just got back from Big Cypress a couple of weeks ago down in South Florida, and you wouldn't think that there'd be much archaeology in the middle of this giant swamp, basically. But yeah, there's like over like 400 archaeological sites in this preserve, and you can just kind of just see that they're in these like elevated hammocks out of the water in more dry spots, and then just investigating them, you can just kind of see, I can see why people would be drawn here, because it's wet all around them. This is like a little bit of refuge. They got lots of resources. They can make cordage. They're protected from, the elements above them and things like that. So just really getting to step foot in these places that, have been utilized by people way back then. Like a lot of these sites were like old seminal camps and things like that. So I'm just thinking to myself, man, we are a little bit more in depth in the realm of history and archaeology than what one might think. And it was pretty amazing.
Yeah. And it's definitely something that I want to do more of with AVAR. I really want to stress the fact that, there are incredible battlefield sites in the U.S. that we're really familiar with. And, I'm happy to keep working those because they're fascinating. But I also want to stress the idea that archaeology in the United States is not limited to what happened after the Europeans showed up. I'd really like to start connecting to some older sites and putting veterans on those older sites so that we can all kind of get a better idea of just what the depth of archaeology in the U.S. is. But yeah, I feel like I've done it a disservice in the past, honestly. I feel like if I would have known more about American archaeology during like my MA programs, for example, I might have taken a completely different course because it's fascinating material and it's worthy of study.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So now kind of talking a little bit about AVAR. I mean, we've been mentioning it throughout this podcast already, but I kind of want to start taking a little bit more of a deeper dive now. Just, you mentioned that this kind of sort of stemmed from, your experiences in England, working on, this Roman fort in Malton, because there was like a British version of this that they were doing with their veterans. So yeah, just kind of talk to us a little bit more about, the founding of AVAR and basically what the mission of AVAR is.
Yeah. So the founding of AVAR was about, I guess, 6 months prior to that mission. That was our first gig, so to speak. So I was out there supervising half the field. I had, I think, 9 American vets and 20 British vets on my side. And then the University of York had, I think, 80 students on the other side. And I will definitely not say that was the smoothest experience I've ever had. I think we all learned a lot of lessons from coming out of that dig. Steve Roscombe, like I mentioned earlier, from York, he and I still work together. He was on this last project we did with AVAR in Southern England, and we definitely want to keep working with him in the future. But we all were like, wow, there's something really cool here, but it needs some work. And I think that's where the evolution of AVAR really more or less started. And my understanding of how to structure a dig in order to better serve the veterans on that project, it needs to be something totally unique. It's something that's not really been done before. Using archaeology to help people is a different way of looking at archaeology. Like I also say all the time, right now we've essentially got archaeologists running, I don't want to use the word therapy, but we've got archaeologists running a well-being program. And what we need are people who specialize in well-being, looking at how to run an archaeology program instead, and how to, okay, this is how I would set up a site. This is how I would set up my teams and set up my long-term development in order to deliver these benefits for these guys, because that's going to be different than how archaeologists do it. But it's taken a couple of years for us to really see, because the British did come up with this idea. They started putting veterans on digs back in 2011. Mm-hmm. But one thing that I've really seen from working in Israel and working in the US and working in the UK is the veterans in each country are different. They all have really different mentalities. The cultures are different enough that it impacts the programs. But also the veteran benefit systems are really different in these programs. So US veterans, for one thing, we have the GI Bill that we can access. When I tell someone, like, yeah, if you want to be an archaeologist and you have your life in check in general, if you don't have tons of bills and you have some kind of a retirement check or a disability check or whatever coming in, this could be a good career field for you, because you got the GI Bill that could help you to go and get a degree that you're going to need in order to be a professional archaeologist. In other countries, they don't necessarily have those benefits that they can draw on. Conversely, in the U.S., our guys tend to be really far apart from each other. I might put a veteran from New York along with a veteran from California on the same project. And so we're looking at how to keep those guys in touch after that dig, because they're not just going to bump into each other at Walmart afterwards.
Right.
So, the situations are really different in different countries. And figuring out a way that adapts American veterans to benefit from what we have to offer in the U.S. is really what we're working on now. It's why we're working with so many American agencies now. We've still got a lot to learn. The British programs are a good program, a good group for us to kind of look at in terms of what has worked and what's worked well and what hasn't worked well. But I think what we've really seen is we have to make it essentially an American program in order to best benefit the American guys out there. So sorry, that's kind of how the AVAR program in I guess vague terms is coming along. I'll mention this too. I think one other thing that's important for me is long-term development. I know I mentioned that earlier too, but everybody tends to like archaeology digs. I mentioned like what sold me on doing this in the first place was going on a dig. Most people will have a good time on an archaeology dig. It's kind of like adult summer camp. I think I've used that term before, but taking guys out, putting them on a project for 2 weeks is not going to fix anybody. 2 weeks of anything is not going to fix somebody. We've got to figure out a way to make this a program that's going to look at these individuals in the long term and move them forward into a career that they feel comfortable with and that they can excel at. So a career where they can compete favorably against other people instead of just saying, well, I'm a veteran, so I want extra points. I want to make better archaeologists than anyone else is making so that they compete on their own value. Or I want to make people who can appreciate this as a hobby, who know that archaeology isn't so boring as a lot of these textbooks look at it, and have something new in their life that they're really passionate about. Because having that sense of passion and purpose is a big help when it comes to combating things like this 22 a day. So I don't need to make someone a professional archaeologist. I need to give them something that they want to keep pursuing for the rest of their long life. And again, it comes down to making that person feel valued. I want that person to be trained better so that when they go on a dig as a volunteer, even 10 years from now, that dig looks at them and says, okay, this person knows what they're doing. I can trust this person. I can trust this person with a trench, or helping out in a trench, helping someone who's got a degree, because this person is if not a certified archaeologist, then a very well-trained archaeologist. Those are two different things. So having that sense of value for me, if that person comes away with that's a win just as much as putting someone in the CRM field. It's really about making that person's life better as a result of participating in archaeological digs. That's what the program is meant to do.
All right, outstanding. Because as you were just mentioning this, I noticed that there's two critical components that are addressed with veterans, especially maybe, let's say, recently separated veterans. At least this is what I've observed from a lot of recently separated veterans, is that they basically just miss being part of a group, being part of a tribe. And, the military provided that for them. Once they separate, again, it's not like they can just run into one of their, fellow veterans that they know in Walmart. The U.S. is a pretty big country. Veterans are pretty scattered throughout this massive country. And then there's also a lack of having a mission, because once you're in the military, you know what your mission is. You know what your purpose is. It's there for you. It's pretty apparent. Not quite so apparent once you separate, though. It's like, well, now what? Where am I supposed to go? They're kind of just astray. But getting them out in the field to do archaeology, there's other veterans on the ground there with them. They could share stories, they could, connect with other veterans, which is highly, highly valuable. And then, of course, now they got this new mission to protect cultural heritage. They've been protecting our freedom, our way of life. Now they get to protect our cultural heritage. So they still have that service aspect that they can kind of incorporate too. And I also like that this isn't like a vacation. Sure, there's that travel and adventure aspect to it, but these guys aren't coming out for 2 weeks just to be put back in the exact same place where they were. They have like a new sense of purpose, maybe a path ahead of them that they could see that maybe wasn't there before. So lots of things that are being addressed here.
Yeah. And I think, from doing all the reading on the different programs and on community archaeology in general, and from working on these projects for several years now, what I really come away from is the fact that archaeology can fix that isolation and disempowerment, like you're talking about. That's what archaeology can really do. And we use that to select our participants. But we also use that as far as how we structure our program. These are the things that I think an archaeology program could do better, is, that long-term connectivity to fix that isolation. And giving those people that sense that this mission they're doing in the ground now is valuable, that they've got a new mission and purpose, and that they're an important part of accomplishing that mission. I know, like for me, it was really hard. And I know all veterans go through this. It was really hard for me to go from being a captain uh, in charge of an aircraft maintenance unit, which is an enlisted heavy field. So in a group of 500, I think there were like 10 officers or something like that. So you're one of the people in the room that's getting asked the big questions at a pretty young age. And it was really hard for me to go from that and having that level of importance, really. It was really hard for my ego to go from that to being a master's student where you do not have that level of importance. You are not, you're just learning the basics, even at a master's level in archaeology, because the people who are in the know in archaeology, a lot of cases are in their like 50s, 60s, 70s. They've got a lifetime of experience because there's so much to learn. So it was really difficult for me to go into that MA program and just, kind of be a number. And I know that's something every veteran goes through. So treating these guys as if their input matters, as if their work matters, and as if their contribution to understanding that site matters. That's an important part, I think, of putting this program together and getting to deliver those benefits. Saying, letting them know, we can't do this without you, which is absolutely true. Like every archaeology site, most archaeology sites, I should say, depend on volunteers and depend on people who want to be there and who are maybe willing to do that dirty work, of actually moving the dirt in the ground. Because academic digs, I guarantee, like that dig director, that head archaeologist out there is not shoveling dirt all day long. That dig would not happen if you didn't have these guys that are volunteering to come out there and help out. So letting them know, you can still contribute to how we understand history, and you're still a really valuable part of this team. The job won't be done without you. That's a big deal. Building in new ways for these guys to get connected in the field and stay connected after the field. That's a big deal. And I think those are things that archaeology can do, and that it already does, but that we can do better.
Yeah, and there's also just a lot of benefits to experience on a personal level too, just with archaeology. Like speaking for myself, when we were actually on the dig for the Roman fort in Moulton, which, by the way, we keep bringing up Moulton, but I guess I should let everybody know it's a small village just east of York, where I went to grad school. And I remember I had recovered a piece of Crambeck ware, which is tied to the Romans. So we're talking like 2,000 years old, just about. And I just remember how excited I was just to know that, okay, this thing's been lost to the world for nearly 2 millennia until me, me found it. And that was just so exciting. And that's also just, that continues just to be a huge fulfilling aspect for me, in this profession. And I can just see a lot of other veterans too, just what the experience they would probably feel knowing that they themselves would uncover something like that down the line. So, because there's that mystery, that appeal to it as well, that I think could have a real good drawing effect.
Oh yeah. Like I think like you said, picking up something that hasn't been touched for hundreds of years and understanding that it was another person like you that last used this, that this was important to somebody else whose life was just so different than yours. I think that can give you a lot of perspective, frankly, and let you realize that there's a much bigger world out there, not only in the world that exists today, but also in the world that has existed in the past, and that everybody's had problems, everybody's fought and gotten through them in different ways. I think archaeology really does lend a lot of perspective. And when you pull out Cranbeck ware, or when you pull out, like Saratoga, you pull out a musket ball that was fired by someone that was fighting for their independence, who now is essentially an American legend, that we only hear about in our storybooks. When you touch that musket ball and you think, wow, this was a real person that fired this, that for this 1 second in time, this was everything to, that does tend to have an impact on you.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is kind of the vision for AVAR on the horizon? Where are you all looking to take veterans in the future? You mentioned that you're coordinating with some different organizations out there. You mentioned the DPAA, the American Battlefield Trust, the Park Service. So what's on the horizon? What do you kind of see, where you might want to take veterans in the future?
Yeah, so I think, people can look on our website and stuff and see that we've got this progression system that we're really trying to put in place. And that's based around creating that long-term benefit and also making our veterans independent, because if someone's coming out on my program for 5 or 6 years in a row, what that's telling me is that they're not getting trained well enough and getting connected well enough to go and dig anywhere else.
Right.
You don't want to see this face every day for 5 or 6 years. So what we're trying to do is make these people able to go out and contribute to other archaeology projects. So people can go out or go and check that out on the website. But what it's really about for me now is putting that progression system together and getting American sites where we can really put a world-class training apparatus in place, so that when these guys come in, we're getting them spun up on how to be competent diggers really, really quickly, so that they can contribute to a project. And then once they figured that out, once they figured out the culture of archaeology and how it's a little different than military culture, then we can send them out someplace else with a little less support. And they can still work with veterans, but they can work with veterans in another country or in a smaller setting to pick up some different skills or some different interests that they might have. And after that, we want to send them out on their own, frankly. We want to send them out with another dig team without an AVAR apparatus in place. So now they're just going out like any other digger would, and they're incorporating into another dig team, and they're showing them what an American veteran can do in the field once they've been trained. That's the progression system that we're really trying to get into place. And we're trying to put digs into place that will move our people through that funnel as effectively as possible. And I'm sure there's going to be things that we switch and move up along the way when we kind of get feedback on what's working and what's not. But right now, that's what we're aiming at. So yeah, what we got in place right now, in terms of this year, frankly, it's been a crazy week with coronavirus, as you know.
Right.
So we actually just had to postpone our dig that we were going to do in April in Israel. We're hoping that that'll come together in October, all things, God willing. We're hoping that the coronavirus, because of its impacts, are lessened. We're hoping that falls away enough that we're able to do our projects this summer. I'll be the first to say that if some people don't get to go and dig this summer, that's less impactful than if thousands of people are killed by this virus. So it's not like it's all about AVAR. But hopefully this thing is killed quickly enough that it doesn't disrupt the summer plans too much. Assuming that's the case, we're going to go to Saratoga in June 1 through 19, and work with the National Park Service again. And then we've got projects with the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency in Sicily and also in Southern England, nice. Both happening in August. Yeah. And those should be really cool. One of them is a B-24 recovery, and that's the one we worked on last year. That's Southern England. And the other one in Sicily is a P-38. So that's going to be a new project for us. Haven't done a fighter before, so that should be something a little bit different. I haven't worked in Sicily before. So, again, hopefully we can do these projects. I did mention earlier, we're also looking at doing some work with the VA. That's just come out this year. I'm super excited about that because that would really let us get the word out about what archaeology can offer to as many veterans as possible who are already in some of these treatment programs and whatnot. So getting those people the word about what we're doing, and then, in this case, even working on like a VA facility, I think would be gold in terms of helping as many people as possible. So we're hoping that comes together this year. I think the only reason it wouldn't would be that coronavirus got in the way. But if not, definitely next year.
Yeah, this thing's definitely disrupting a lot of things for sure. Well,
you probably saw that SAA was just canceled. The Society for American Archaeology annual meeting in Austin was just canceled like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be a big deal for the rest of the year. So fortunately, I'm at the point in building the program that it's not actually as disastrous to us as it could be. So I don't have too much to complain about aside from the fact that we might lose some projects, but we'll be all right either way.
Right. Well, I'm hoping that this coronavirus does then dispel us from undergoing this fundraising project that we have later this year that I want to talk about really quick. In June, I am making my way down to South America to walk the length of 2 countries down there. I intend to walk the entire length of Paraguay, and I intend to walk the entire length of Uruguay. And this is an effort to raise money for, in fact, AVAR. So that way y'all can get some additional funds. That's also got to be one of the challenges, I'm sure, of, running a nonprofit, being very dependent on donations in order to make the wheels go round. So I imagine that's got to be pretty challenging in and of itself too, eh?
Yeah. So I think one of the enlightening things to me after I kind of picked up this project was that, CEOs and nonprofits, that's really your job, is fundraising. And it never ends. So I can't thank you enough, first off, for the willingness to donate funds and to do this and kick funds our way. I'm incredibly thankful that we met a few years ago and that you see the potential in the program to help us out like this. I'll say too, from my perspective, it costs us about $1,500 to put a veteran on a dig for 2 weeks, which is incredibly low. If you look at the costs, both of other programs and of archaeology in general, a lot of that is because we get donations from communities and whatnot that really help us out. So, $1,500 per veteran to have a pretty life-changing experience is about what we're looking at. So if we can get a few folks to kick that much cash our way, it would make a world of difference for some people. But yeah, I think it's really cool that your archaeological career is still incorporating that kind of interest in doing something different and outside the bounds and just going out and seeing some really cool stuff. I think that's what archaeology should be all about. It's just going off and having these kinds of adventures and recognizing that there's some really cool stuff out there that we don't know enough about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that's drawn me to both Paraguay and Uruguay is kind of, well, to me, they're both quote unquote uncharted territory. I've never been to either one of these countries before, nor have I even been to South America before. So I'm kind of checking off a few boxes here. But it's just, I think one of the big things that I really want to convey to, well, maybe not to just veterans, but just to, human beings in general is just, what it is that we're capable of. I mean, a lot of people think that walking 1,000 miles is this big, unfathomable endeavor that someone can do. But it's just, I'm like, well, we've done some pretty amazing things in the past. I know we kind of maybe lost track of the fact that, people have been just, making their way around the world for forever, walking, taking these long, arduous journeys. We're capable of doing such things, but maybe with our modern day comforts, I don't know, that maybe we might have lost track of that. So I just really want to showcase just what veterans are capable of, because, veterans, especially, they can do a lot of amazing things because they already have. I mean, you have things like basic training, which is a very, very daunting thing in and of its own right. And then some have been on deployments and things like that who just undergone some of the most unbelievable challenges and endeavors. And then, just hoping that they can reflect on that and just know that, we can go out and achieve a lot of amazing things because we already have. And that's really what I want to showcase with this expedition is just that, if we want to achieve something, if we put our mind to it, we can do it. And so that's, a huge drawing effect that I want to, I guess, showcase through this expedition as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think in for my program, I think there's a lot of synergy between those ideas because, like, for my program, it's really rewarding to see veterans who recognize that the coolest thing that they've done with their life might not be enlisting when they're 18, and that there's still a lot of really cool stuff that we can go out and do. You can still be that risk taker to an extent. You can still be that person that goes off and has these adventures, even if you're not wearing a uniform anymore. So yeah, I think it's awesome. And in terms of archaeological adventures, I should probably say too, like, I recognize that I said earlier I had a lot of fun, like in Cyprus and Israel and stuff. Like, yeah, there are definitely archaeologists in these countries that are doing that work on these sites already. It's not like we're uncovering new things necessarily when we go to these sites, but they're new for us. It's stuff that we didn't know about. It's a new perspective on history that we didn't already have. And yeah, I think there's a lot of value in educating yourself about the incredible accomplishments of some of these other cultures that we're not necessarily familiar with.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, the expedition that I'm going to be doing, I have dubbed Operation Dual Trek, which is dual like DUAL, not like dual like a sword fighting duel. I probably should just put that out there. It's like dual like the number two, two either countries. I guess either one sounds cool enough, I suppose. But there is a GoFundMe page out there right now. And I will also let the listeners know this, is that, if you make a donation on the GoFundMe page, it's going to go directly towards AVAR. Yours truly here is actually self-financing the entire cost of this expedition, all the way down to, the gear, the logistics, the food, what have you. I'm covering all of that. So you could be rest assured that any donation that someone does decide to make, it's going to go directly towards helping veterans through this organization, through Archaeology. So, and anyone who does donate, obviously I'll thank them in advance. I know it's kind of hard to do, especially right now with the current climate and the way things are in the world. But, for anyone who wants to help out veterans today, we appreciate it.
Yeah. And I'll say, if that money is coming straight to us, the reason our cost for helping vets is so low is because our overhead's nothing. I mean, we don't have a physical office. I haven't taken a paycheck for this program in 4 years now. This will actually be the first year I get paid anything, and that's only through doing the Defense POW MIA accounting agency contracts. So if people pay us, or people donate to us, a percentage of that money isn't hitting my bank account at all. That's going straight to putting veterans on the project. So we use it as well as we can.
All right. And I appreciate that, because I know that sometimes that might make a little bit, some people reluctant. They've heard about, some things, maybe some shadiness done with previous things in the past. But, it's just, here we're really trying to put the veterans first. I mean, it's just, we can't thank these veterans enough for, what they've done, stepping up to serve our country, especially post 9/11 veterans. We're the smallest community of veterans that our country has ever seen. And so it takes a lot to step up and to serve your country in that capacity in this day and age. And so for those who have, been willing to do it, definitely, hopefully we can give back, just a little something to them,
Yeah. Yep. That's what it's all about. I mean, I think it's been really interesting to see kind of the different demographics coming through the program, and how post 9/11 veterans are a little bit different from everyone else. But again, I don't mean to keep beating the drum, but one of the reasons the program works is because there aren't that many of us. And most people out there don't really understand the post 9/11 veteran experience. We're kind of, a tiny percent of the population. So getting those folks back together again and giving them someone else to talk to that's been through it, that's what we're here for.
All right. Outstanding. All right. Well, Stephen, we're kind of starting to get near the end of our time. So just kind of moving up to the wrap up. We talked about a lot of cool things. We got to hear a little bit about your travels. We got to hear a little bit about how veterans and what they can benefit from archaeology, and just, other cool things about archaeology in general. So we put forth a lot of stuff today. But, information and things along those lines, they can only really go so far. We have to follow it up with action at some point in time. So I've been asking my guests recently to issue a challenge to the listener. So I'll ask you to do the same. So what challenge would you issue to our listeners for them to go out and start living a more adventurous life?
Honestly, I know this is a relatively simple thing, but I would say work out. I would say 30 minutes of working out during the day. And the reason that is not happy, fluffy talk. That is because when I take veterans out on projects, a lot of us still think that we're in our 20s, and we're not. And your physical conditioning is going to directly impact how much you can enjoy that adventure and how much you can participate in that adventure. And your mental conditioning, even if that's great, if your body just can't do it, then that's going to limit how much you can interact. And I see this with my guys that come out on dig. So we're actually looking at putting in a physical therapy program just before the dig, so that when they come out, they can perform the way they want to. So yeah, I think exercise by far.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, that's actually something that I've brought up several times on this podcast. Is I always say, my quote is, your body is the vessel with which you will do all things. And if you don't have it running optimally, that's going to trickle and negatively impact pretty much every facet of your life, whether that's your role as a parent, your role as a husband, a wife, in your career, in your business, and things like that. Yeah, if you don't have your body running as best it possibly can, yeah, that's going to negatively impact a lot of things. And of course, certainly would apply in the realm of field archaeology just as well, too.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, good challenge. Now, what I have for you next is what I call my final three. These are three, I like to think that they're fun questions that I ask all of my guests at the end of the show. So you're going to get asked these as well. And the first of those three questions is, what is your favorite place that you've been to so far?
Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem is my favorite place on earth. Just absolutely love it. Most peaceful, relaxed place I can imagine. History is incredible there. Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
Easy answer.
Yeah. That place for me was, quite overwhelming, just, being in there and, seeing where, the cross that they had crucified Jesus on had stood, and then also the tomb. I'm just like, wow, this is this is a bit overwhelming. But and it was also interesting because it was kind of tucked away, like pretty good, like in the city too. I thought that was kind of interesting as well.
Yeah, it's actually kind of surprising how it's just sort of there, like in alleys. You just bump into it almost by mistake if you're not really looking for it. So yeah, it's a cool place.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Yeah. I'd say that's probably a first to come up on the podcast. I don't even think anyone's mentioned Israel or any place within Israel as a favorite just yet. At least not off the top of my head. So yeah, this is definitely a first, Stephen, for sure.
glad to contribute.
All right. And the next question: what is one thing on your bucket list that you have yet to do?
One thing on my bucket list, I want to do a AVAR maritime archaeology dig.
Oh, yeah.
Veterans,
that would be awesome.
On an underwater archaeology project that's kind of structured in our stuff, and it's it's years away. The amount of training we'd have to put in, and the liability, and all that mess, and making sure it actually works well for them, and all that's a while away. But I think that'd be really cool.
Oh, but that would be amazing, though. Wow. That's a good goal to shoot for. I like that. Awesome. All right. And the last question, and this is a two-parter. What is your favorite animal, and have you seen this animal in the wild?
That's a big question. What's my favorite animal? So I was just out in DC like last week doing some meetings and stuff, and I got to go through National Geographic's museum because National Geographic does have a museum in DC, and they rotate their displays, of course.
Yeah, I did not know that. That's cool.
They do. So they've got the National Geographic building. Yeah, National Geographic has a lot of different stuff, cool stuff that they do. But they've got a National Geographic building, and if you're an explorer, you can come in and use like the Explorer's Lounge, and they really hook you up. So they took good care of me. But and they also give you free tickets to their museum. So I was like, okay, well, I'll during my one day off, I'll go and look through the museum. They have a Jane Goodall exhibit right now in that museum. So I could be biased because I went through that thing like a week ago. But it's about Jane Goodall, but it's about her research on chimpanzees. Mm-hmm. And after going through that museum, I was like, man, I don't know enough about chimpanzees. I don't know enough about human origins in general. So I just actually started listening to a podcast about Neanderthals. But because her mentor was looking at like human origins, that's kind of where her research came from. He wanted to see if chimpanzees could give us insights about where people came from in the first place. And anyway, so yeah, after going through that museum, I got to say, favorite animal may be chimps, and I have not seen them in the wild. But now after watching that again, I would love to, because it was like the most fascinating thing.
Oh wow, and I think that's another first to come up on the podcast is chimpanzees. I mean, has even primates been mentioned on this podcast yet? I'm not sure. I mean, we definitely covered a wide array of the animal kingdom. I'm not sure if we brought up primates yet. So there we go. We got another first for this one.
Yeah, that's I mentioned American archaeology, but like that's another one of those things like early human origins and early hominids. That's another one of those things where even toward the end of my PhD, I was like, man, kind of wish I would have studied this instead. That stuff's really cool. I don't know anything about it. So yeah, I'm gonna go with chimps.
All right. Very cool. All right. Well, Stephen, before we close out here, where can the listeners go to connect with you? Where can they learn more about AVAR? And, I guess, yeah. So where can we find you out there?
Yeah. So our web presence is getting a little better. You can go check out our website. It's got a lot of the information about the program. It's also got a contact form. So if people want to contact us, they can go to our contact form. And if nothing else, it would give me a break because we get a lot of spam through there, and it would be nice to see a real person message us through it. You can also hit us up through Facebook. We're pretty active on Facebook right now, both in terms of our main page, but also our community page, because after someone's been on a project with us, they get to kind of join that one. So come follow us on Facebook, see what we're doing, and see about getting on the dig with us if you're a vet.
All right. And I'll get all of those linked up in the show notes for this episode. And the listeners can also find a link to the GoFundMe page for Operation Dual Trek. That'll be in the show notes as well. We're going to be expanding that fundraiser pretty much for the next, several months, as I'm making my way down to South America and, doing my thing down there. I'm about 3 months away right now from stepping off. So they could go and they can find a link to that as well. All right. Well, Stephen, I want to thank you very much for taking the time for joining me today. I know things have just been a little bit crazy on your end, obviously, with a lot of the growth that you're experiencing, which I'm, really excited and to hear about when you were telling me, just because, it's really just great to just see all these other organizations and entities out there that are also taking an interest and willing to step up to try to help our veterans as well. And, of course, I obviously appreciate the work that you're doing. I know, again, it can be very challenging, to try to get this thing going, but I just appreciate how you're showing up, for our veterans as well. So thanks a lot for what you do. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And thanks for having me on, and thanks for fundraising for us through your own adventures. I look forward to hearing more about it.
All right. Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Stephen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.